Good afternoon. Welcome to the Manhattan Public hearing on the proposed fiscal year 2017 New York City water rates. My name is Eric Landau, and I will serve as the hearing officer for this afternoon's meeting. I'd like to take just a minute to give a brief overview of today's process. First, we'd like everyone to please note that we place certain documents into the official record, which are maintained by the New York City Water Board. Those are the notice designating me as the hearing officer, a copy of the public notices listing this hearing and an affidavit of publication of such notices, the draft of the proposed water and wastewater rate schedule, the public information booklet regarding water and wastewater rates, copies of which are available just outside, and all written statements submitted by members of the public to the New York City Water Board. These items are marked as Exhibits 1 through 5. In just a moment, we will hear a presentation from New York City Department of Environmental Protection First Deputy Commissioner Steve Lawitz on the water rate proposal, and then we'll open up the meeting to the members of the public to provide comments. If you've not yet signed up to speak, but you would like to do so, please take a moment at this time to do so at the registration table, which again is just right outside these double doors. Please note that you can also submit written testimony to the New York City Water Board up until the close of business on May 12th. These statements will be entered into the record, and copies will be distributed to the Water Board members for their review and consideration prior to the adoption of a rate schedule for fiscal year 2017. I'd like to introduce the individuals joining me up here. First of all, our chairman of the New York City Water Board, Alfonso Cardi. We're joined currently by Water Board members Joe Finnerty and Jonathan Golden. The Water Board Executive Director, Matil McLean, and Water Board Treasurer, Omar Nazim. Mr. Chairman, was there anything you'd like to add before we begin?
Very briefly, I want to thank you for introducing the board. Is it on? Can you hear me? Okay, I'll lean into it better. We're fortunate to have with us today First Deputy Commissioner Stephen Lawitz. He was the first person I met with anything to do with the Water Board years back. It's great to have you here, Steve, for the presentation. Matil, pleasure to meet you as well. In your new capacity as Deputy Director of the Water Board, thank you for all you do. You've heard the order of service here, so that you know how this is going to proceed. Steve's going to give the presentation, and then we're going to take public comment. I'm looking forward to the public comment. Everybody on this board is. This is what we do. The staff makes a proposal. That proposal was made in May, in early April actually, and now we get public comment, and we take public comment in all 5 boroughs. We're here to listen. We're here to understand how people feel about that, what people think about that. We're here to listen to recommendations, and those recommendations are important to us. So please, if you have an inclination, don't hesitate to come to the microphone and to speak up. It's good to have you all here. My last comment is this. The proposal that will be presented today is just that. It's a proposal. Everybody on this board remains open-minded about what the final result's going to be. These hearings are to help us to determine what those results will look like. So please, if you have something that you think is going to affect the judgment of people here, don't hesitate to share it with us. It's a proposal now. It will become something later on. Welcome. Thank you for being here. And with that, I will introduce once again First Deputy Commissioner Stephen Lawitz. Steve, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and members, good afternoon, and members of the public. Thank you for coming out today. Not the greatest day weather-wise. It's probably good for our reservoirs, which, as of this morning, are almost 99% full, about 0.5% higher than normal for this time of year, but not so good for us right now in the city. So this is just a caution of what follows. There are going to be some unsettling images in the slides that follow, but we wanted to just remind you how much that water has been in the news lately, and sorry. There we go. Yeah. So everyone's heard about Flint, and I will, this I think provides an opportunity to just say at the outset, highlight how New York City is different than Flint. What happened there, it's been well publicized. When the city of Flint switched water sources from the Detroit water system to the Flint River, they missed a few critical steps, did not adjust treatment of the water for the different characteristics of water in the Flint River, which was more corrosive, which facilitated the leaching of lead into the water supply system. At DEP, we test the drinking water. We perform 500,000, that's 500,000 tests on water quality each year at each step of the way, from the furthest away reservoir, 150 miles from the city, all the way to the water mains and the approximately 1,000 gray boxes you see around the city that show that are water sampling stations. We test the water for pH, and because we don't want it to be too acidic, because that causes the lead to leach into the drinking water. And we add orthophosphate, which is a food-grade additive that coats the pipes and helps to prevent lead that might be in the pipes from leaching into the drinking water. And I want to say at the outset, the New York City water system, the water mains, are lead-free. We don't have lead pipes. Lead pipes exist in service lines, the privately owned lines that connect individual buildings to our water mains, and in the internal or domestic plumbing of many buildings, can be either lead or can be copper piping with lead solder, depending on when that piping was installed. We recognize the need to invest in our infrastructure. And I should have said at the outset, none of the photos I'm going to show you that are unsettling are photos of New York City. They're all other places. So we recognize in our system, as many of you know, dates back to 1842. We have a lot of infrastructure that's over 100 years old, but we plan for the continued upgrading and renewing of that infrastructure. We perform a pretty robust asset management program where we assess the condition of thousands of individual assets and look at the likelihood that they could fail and the consequences of that failure, and we use that to prioritize our capital investment. We also have invested a lot in wastewater treatment, and we perform about 600,000 tests on harbor water quality each year. And we began measuring water quality in the harbor over 100 years ago. The water quality tests indicate that the New York City harbor waters are the cleanest that they've been in over 100 years. This is the cover of a publication from the American Water Works Association, and it highlights the need for continued investment in the infrastructure. So we are well positioned to keep providing the drinking water that is known throughout the world for its high quality its purity and its taste, and to continue to treat the wastewater, facilitate recreation in the waters surrounding New York. But all of that takes money. In the past 15 years, we've invested close to $30 billion in both water and wastewater infrastructure. And some of our biggest projects, the Croton Filtration Plant, which began construction in 2007 and began operation almost exactly a year ago. I believe it was a year ago this week. City Water Tunnel number 3, almost $5 billion so far. And I'll pause on City Water Tunnel number 3 for a minute because that's also been the subject of a number of news articles. So the last portion of City Water Tunnel number 3 that's not yet in service is the portion that serves Queens and Brooklyn. And I'll get into this in more detail later. We have over $350 million currently in the capital program to complete design on 2 shafts remaining to be built and to construct those 2 shafts. And when we update our 10-year capital needs next January, we will add into our capital program expenditures taking place beyond 2020 to connect the tunnel to the existing distribution systems in Brooklyn and Queens, and to disinfect the tunnel to make it fully ready for distribution throughout the city. And adding, I think many of you know, that the last portion of City Water Tunnel to go into service was the portion in southern Manhattan that went into service in October of 2013. We invest a lot in our wastewater treatment. As I said, the biggest example is the Newtown Creek Wastewater Treatment Plant, our largest one, where in the last few years we completed a complete rebuilding and upgrading of the plant to meet current treatment standards, total cost of $5 billion. Those are the digester eggs, which have become an icon in New York. For those unfortunate enough to be traveling on the LIE or the Kosciuszko Bridge. The Flushing Creek combined sewer overflow facility, and what you see here is a play field, and in the back is a recreation center as an example of the community benefits that we provide when we install a large piece of water system infrastructure in a neighborhood. And over the next 10 years, we have plans to continue to invest over nearly $17 billion. And we will have more to say about that again when we update our 10-year capital strategy in January. And our prospective investments include the repair of the Delaware Aqueduct, which carries 50% of New York City's drinking water, the activation of City Water Tunnel number 3, as I had just said. We have $1.5 billion in the budget for investments in Southeast Queens stormwater management. Southeast Queens, unfortunately, was largely built out without catch basins or means to collect stormwater. There's a lot of flooding in Southeast Queens, and we're addressing this in a very comprehensive way at a cost of $1.5 billion. We began our green infrastructure program about 5 years ago, and it's in the plan for $947 million. What you see here is an example of a bioswale in Brooklyn, I believe, and we are building 9,000 of those bioswales in portions of Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx, in neighborhoods that are most prone to combined sewer overflows during heavy rains. And this is a much less expensive way of capturing stormwater, much less expensive than building huge underground storage tanks and tunnels. And it also provides a neighborhood benefit in the form of thousands of curbside gardens. Just a couple of examples of investments we're making in the borough of Manhattan. $420 million upgrade of the Wards Island wastewater treatment plant, one of our largest. And we're doing a comprehensive replacement of water mains along 124th Street in Harlem. And all of this infrastructure and all the operations of the system have to be monitored every minute of every day. And we need to keep putting money into our operations to keep the quality of the water and the level of service at levels that New Yorkers deserve. And as I had said before, between drinking water and wastewater, we perform over 1 million tests a year. We monitor ourselves. We have hundreds of metrics by which we measure ourselves so that we can continually make ourselves better. An example of this is combined sewer overflows. And you can see that over the past 5 years, we've had a very significant reduction in sewer backups in confirmed sewer backups. So, in order to fund all of this, we are requesting of the Water Board that we raise the rates by 2.1% for the fiscal year that begins July 1st. This would be the lowest water rate increase in 16 years. As you can see from this chart, and the proposed 2.1% increase is all the way on the right. This would be the 6th year in a row, 6th consecutive year, where each year's rate increase is smaller than the one before. And from what we can see today, that trend should continue into the next year. But what does a 2.1% increase mean? Now, you know that anyone who receives a water bill knows that our standard unit of measurement when billing is 100 cubic feet, which, by the way, is 748 gallons, but it's not a unit of measurement that is familiar to most people, so we thought that we would display for the first time what it means in something that's a little more comprehensible in the cost per gallon. And so the cost is going from, that's 1.32 cents per gallon to 1.35 cents. So the increase is 3/100ths of 1 cent per gallon. That's the cost of both drinking water and wastewater combined. And if you think of that 1 cent per gallon, and if you think of what you pay for a half liter of bottled water in the store, the price of tap water, or I should say the price of bottled water, is about 60,000% higher, 60,000% than filling your bottle from the tap. What it means for the average single family home is an increase of $23 a year, or about $1.85 per month, which in some stores is the price of a bottle of water. And for our customers who are minimum billing, who consume less than 95 gallons a day approximately, we are holding their rates constant for, it's the third consecutive freeze, which means it's the fourth year in a row where the annual minimum charge would be $464. For the multifamily conservation program, which includes about 26,000 larger buildings, the effect would be about $21 a year per dwelling unit, per apartment. And New York City water, besides being a lot cheaper than bottled water, is also the only major component of the cost of living in New York that is less expensive than the national average. This chart, which we've shown for the last few years and we update every year, is looking at 30 large cities across the country, and New York City water is less expensive. Real estate, much more expensive. Other things like electricity, cable, not quite so much more expensive as real estate is, but still more expensive. Drinking water, about 4% below the national average. Just quickly, this is a chart showing 30 largest cities and their average annual rates of increase over the last over the last 17 years. And you have a few outliers, and interestingly, Chicago, which is shown here as the lowest rate, has traditionally been low because, unlike most other cities, Chicago water rates are subsidized from their general fund. And even Atlanta, which is the highest one on this chart, the red line at the top, 1% of the sales tax in Atlanta goes towards funding their wastewater treatment. So at the extremes, you have two systems that are partially subsidized by the general fund. And again, in New York City, the customers pay 100% of our costs. Again, another way of showing this, New York compared to the 30 large cities, where the green bar just about in the middle and 4% below the average line. So besides a 2.1% increase, we are proposing what we feel will be a number of benefits to many of our customers. Again, we're freezing the minimum charge, and that will benefit almost 150,000 properties, many of them seniors and low-income people. The leak forgiveness program, which we liberalized in the last year or two, 2 years ago? 2 years ago. That went quickly. But so far, over 5,000 customers have benefited from this and have collectively saved $5.5 million, or over $1,000 per customer. The Service Line Protection Program, which exceeded all of our expectations, both DEPs, our vendors, and many of the other cities who have offered a similar program for a number of years. The rate of subscription among our customers defied our expectations, and so we now have over 216,000 customers enrolled in this, and they have saved collectively about $50 million versus what they would have had to pay a plumber to come out and either fix or repair their water main or fix or repair their sewer. And while the individual benefit varies greatly from one customer to the next, because some of the covered repairs involve just jetting or cleaning the sewers, but some have involved replacing the water service line for its entire length or the sewer service line, and either of those can cost many thousands of dollars. We introduced the Home Water Assistance Program 2 years ago, initially to benefit those who were eligible for a HEAP, Home Energy Assistance Program, an initial population of 12,000. We expanded that to include seniors and disabled homeowners who were receiving the senior or disabled homeowner exemption from the New York City Department of Finance on their property taxes. And we're expanding it again this year to include a larger senior population with incomes of up to $50,000. The previous cap for eligibility for the senior citizen homeowner exemption was $37,000 and change. So we expect to get a total enrollment in this program of 120,000 low-income homeowners. And we are introducing, or we're proposing to introduce, for the first time this year, a multifamily affordable housing program. And we've developed this in conjunction with the city's Department of Housing Preservation and Development. And it will benefit 40,000 affordable housing units. So 40,000 individual apartments will be eligible for a credit of $250 a year. And like the Home Water Assistance Program, where the annual benefit at a proposed rate of $118 is pegged to the minimum charge, and to provide, in essence, a 25% credit, a 25% reduction in the annual minimum charge that they would otherwise pay. The $250 credit represents about a 25% reduction in the annual $1,000 plus multifamily conservation program flat rate that 26,000 buildings currently participate in. One of the benefits for New York City will be that the buildings, only buildings that either sign a new affordability agreement with HPD or the Housing Development Corporation, or who maintain the affordability under an existing agreement for an additional 15 years will be eligible for this credit. So a 25% discount for most in exchange for committing to keep every apartment in that building affordable for the next 15 years. And last week, Mayor de Blasio announced that he is eliminating the rental payment. It was one of the commitments he made as a candidate for mayor. It was one of his criticisms of the rate structure when he was public advocate. And the mayor last year had accelerated the demise of the rental payment and had authorized a reduction in the rental payment by 10 percentage points each year. So in the current fiscal year, the rental payment was reduced by approximately, it was reduced by 40%. And we were on track in the coming year to reduce the rental payment by 50%, by 60% in the following year, 70%, and so on. But last week the mayor announced that effective July 1st, he's eliminating the rental payment altogether. So the mayor is not exercising the option he has in the lease between the water board and the city to request a rental payment. he's committed to not requesting rental payment for the remainder of his term. That and he proposed, and we're proposing to the board, that the $122 million that was otherwise going to be the rental payable in the coming year to the city be flowed back to all homeowners of tax class 1 properties. Those are properties that have 1 to 3 family homes, and that'll be a credit of $183. It'll benefit a total of 664,000 properties all across the city. Not that many in Manhattan, frankly, because many of you know there just aren't that many single-family homes in Manhattan. But in many of the other boroughs there are. And through 2020, the elimination of the rental payment will benefit all ratepayers because it will save the system collectively $1.1 billion between now and 2020, which is a cumulative benefit of about 7% from now through 2020. And finally, the change we're proposing in our rate schedule is to revise the deadline for compliance with the terms of the multifamily conservation program. The two primary criteria are that you have to have low flow fixtures and you have to have a modern meter with automated meter reading installed. It's been difficult for many properties to comply. Out of the 26,000 participants in the program, 10,000 are currently not in full compliance. The deadline was this June 30th, but rather than force 10,000 buildings with many apartments into metered billing, which on average would cost them about 31% more, we are giving them a 6-month extension to meet these two criteria. And then after December 31st, if they still haven't met the eligibility criteria, we will subject them to a 10% increase above any other increase that might get imposed a year from now. So, how did we come to be able to propose a rate increase, again, that is the lowest one in 16 years, and the 6th consecutive year of a declining rate of increase? We've had strong revenue collections, and we are about $109 million ahead of plan, about 4%. If you're an investor, maybe this isn't such good news, but if you're an entity like the New York Water Finance Authority that sells billions of dollars of bonds each year to invest in the capital needs of our system, we have benefited from historically low interest rates. And sorry if I offended them, but we are going to save us $121 million next year, and the Water Finance Authority has been very aggressive at refinancing costlier older debt, just in the way that you might refinance your mortgage, and also buying back older expensive debt earlier than it would otherwise retire, and that buyback will save $1.4 billion over what would have been the life of that debt. We also are on track to spend $126 million less than we had budgeted in operations and maintenance. But against that backdrop of good news is the trend that is of concern and of most concern to us is our rising debt profile. we currently have over $29 billion in debt outstanding. And this chart here, which we've shown in past years, shows our capital investment. The black bars show commitments, which is the money we earmark when we award a contract. So, for example, in 2007, the year in which we awarded most of the construction contracts for the Croton filtration plant, you can see that that black bar spiked. So we just for Croton, we committed almost $2 billion that year. So that was money that we had locked up, in effect, to be spent only on the Croton contract. But in a multi-year construction project, the expenditures take place over a number of years. I said Croton was finished just last May in 2015, so it was in construction for 8 years. The expenditures follow a construction curve over those 8 years. The blue bars show the trend in the construction expenditures, which lag the commitments, and the red line is the debt service. So every time we make an expenditure, every time we pay one of our construction contractors, we have to float bonds. The New York Water Finance Authority has to float bonds to pay our contractors. And that's the red line. And that will keep increasing for the foreseeable future because we have to keep investing in the system, because our bonds are typically 30-year bonds. And the Finance Authority issued its first bonds in 1985. It issued about $500 million, $500 million in bonds. So 30 years later, that oldest layer is retired and peeled off the bottom. So that's $500 million that's peeled off the bottom. But we're layering on top with our next year's expenditures somewhere between $1.5 and $2 billion. And only if we ever get to the point where the bottom layer that we're peeling off is no smaller than the next layer we're adding on, that red line is going to continue to go up. And in the pie chart, you can see this more clearly. The blue slice is our debt service. It is projected to be 46% of our total expenditures next year. And that is the largest single piece of the pie. It was formerly the second largest piece, with operations and maintenance being the largest. But about 4 years ago, we crossed that line where debt service became the largest because of our continuing need to invest. So how did we come up with the 2.1%? And for this, I can't look at those small numbers on the screen. I have to look at this. We had shown on the previous slide that our total system costs about $4.9 billion for the year that's going to end this June, and about $4.7 billion for next year. And if you follow the chart down on the right for next year, we are going to carry forward revenue that we expect to have on hand at the end of this year, $979 million, but that revenue goes to pay debt service. And in the first days of the fiscal year. And that's one of the reasons that we have the 2 highest bond ratings in the industry, is because we're able to pay such a big portion of our annual debt service right up front at the beginning of the fiscal year. We also need to deduct our upstate revenue, because you don't consume upstate water unless you live upstate, and you as New York City ratepayers don't pay the upstate water bills. So we have a revenue need of $3.5 billion in the city. we had a revenue need of $3.7 billion this year. So if we just look at our prior year revenue, $3.7 billion, the orange cell, and you deduct from it our expected decrease in consumption. We've had a long-term pattern of consumption declining by about 1.5% a year, as well as non-recurring revenue. So I mentioned a number of programs that benefit low income and seniors. By giving them discounts, it's money that they were paying in prior years, but they're not going to be paying next year if the rate is approved. So we have to deduct that. So if we kept the rates the same, we would expect to take in $3.475 billion. But the yellow cell says we need $3.548 billion. It's a difference of $73 million, which is 2.1%. So we have 3 more hearings. We had Staten Island last night. We have you today, and we're going to be visiting the other boroughs next week. And again, just to recap, 2.1%, and how it affects our various customer classes. And we'll leave this up if anyone wants to submit testimony. They have until May 12th to do so, and you can do so by U.S. mail or email. And I will turn it back to the hearing officer now.
Thank you, Commissioner. Before we move to public comments, I'd like to acknowledge that we've been joined by 2 additional ward board members, Ju K. Shu and Adam Freed. At this time, we'd like to open it up to members of the public to make comments. Again, if you've already signed up, we'll have you in the order in which you signed up. If you have not yet signed up, after we get through everyone that has signed up, we'll open up to anybody who would still like to speak. We do ask that you keep your remarks to no more than 5 minutes, as we want to make sure that everyone who would like to speak has an opportunity to do so. And with that, I will call on the first speaker, which is Justin Curtis from Utility.
Good afternoon. My name is Justin Curtis. I'm legal advisor at Utility LLC. I address the Water Board to comment on the following provisions of the current water and wastewater rate schedule. In turn, I ask the Board to consider my comments and amend the current schedule. Turning to Part 8, Section 2, Complaint Resolution and Appeal Process. Part 8, Section 2 states in relevant part that a customer file a written complaint of a disputed bill within 4 years of the bill date. Part 6, Section 7, entitled Back Billing Limits, states in relevant part that time limits are not applicable when the customer or a third party caused or in some way contributed to the inaccurate or untimely billing. Customers, however, are not afforded similar protections under Part 8, Section 2. Aggrieved customers are subject to a 4-year limitation period in which bills can be disputed. The company's conduct cannot be taken into consideration to extend or otherwise waive the limitations period. To provide a real-life example, excuse me, DEP installed and read a meter servicing 10 buildings on a regular basis for a period of approximately 15 years. The aggrieved, despite having approximately 180 opportunities, assuming monthly billing, DEP continued to bill the entity at 10 times the correct rate for the entire period of 15 years due to an incorrect multiplier. The aggrieved customer can only recover for 4 out of these 15 years, even though the error was perpetuated by DEP's conduct. To provide a second real-life example, DEP installed a main service meter and then a secondary meter on a branch pipe off of the main line, causing a customer to be billed twice for the same consumption. DEP read both the main service meter and the incorrectly installed branch meter for a period of no less than the approximate 25 years and billed the customer accordingly. Again, the aggrieved customer can only recover for 4 of these 25 years. even though it was overbilled because of this error. The Water Board should extend its customers a similar recovery provision where the billing error is caused by DEP's own conduct to promote fairness and equity in billing. In turn, I ask the following language be added into this section. And I quote, "The time limitations of this section do not apply where the conduct of the DEP and its associated entities caused or otherwise contributed to failure and render timely and or accurate billing." Turning to Part 3, Section 7, entitled Wastewater Allowances for Commercial or Industrial Property. This is my second point. Part 3, Section 7 states in relevant part that a wastewater allowance previously granted will be revoked if any delinquent charge remains unpaid after written notice of the delinquency is provided. The language contained in the provision penalizes customers twofold, on both interest, which we're not contesting, and lost credits. The intent of the allowance is to credit customers for water supplied and not discharged into the wastewater system, not to penalize customers twice. To provide a real-life example, a customer with a $10,000 cooling credit is late on paying a $1,000 bill. The customer forfeits the $10,000 credit. Once the late bill is satisfied, however, the $10,000 credit is not retroactively restored, and the customer is charged both interest on its late payment and its lost credits. Less stringent methods should be enacted to ensure both fairness and equity, again, in billing practices. For example, once any delinquency is satisfied, DEP should retroactively apply the cooling tower credit. Further, if there are any delinquencies on the account, DEP could deduct the delinquency from the credit. In turn, I ask the following language be added into this section. Once any delinquency is satisfied, any and all credits will be retroactively applied by DEP to the customer's account. Turning to my third point, Part 6, Section 6, entitled Refunds. Part 6, Section 6 states in relevant part that credit balances will be applied to future charges and charges due on other accounts of the same owner. Part 6, Section 6 does not, however, authorize the board to withhold a customer's transfer of credits from one account to another account controlled by the same owner. Once DEP determines a customer is due a credit, the credit should be available to that customer for transfer. Any uncontested amount should not be withheld from the customer, where the customer contests other billing amounts above and beyond what has already been determined as uncontested. To provide an example, DEP is withholding the transfer of credit by a customer where the credit granted is uncontested. The DEP is...
You can go ahead and conclude your point.
Thank you. The DEP has stated that it will not transfer this credit until the customer drops the claim for credits above and beyond what is uncontested. In turn, I ask that the following language be added into this section. Credit shall be transferable to any account under the customer's control, irrespective of any and all further unresolved issues on either account. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Brian Ketchum.
I'm not a lawyer. I'm a retired environmental and transportation engineer, and I'm no stranger to DEP. I set up the Bureau of Motor Vehicle Pollution Control in 1970 for you folks. I wrote New York City's Transportation Control Plan in 1972, 73. Well, it wasn't enforced. It did help to stop the West Side Highway project. My company, Con Ketchum, wrote both the Solid Waste Master Plan and the Medical Waste Master Plan for you folks. I have homes in Cobble Hill, Brooklyn, and in the Catskills. And since you have paid so little attention to the folks who live and work in the Catskills, I'm going to focus on them. The Catskills continue to get a lousy deal from you folks. And there are many people in the Catskills who really hate New York City for these actions. 100 years ago, DEP the board cheated the people of the Catskills. In constructing the reservoirs, you destroyed nearly 24 towns, displaced 6,000 residents. And today, as you buy up properties, take them off the tax rolls, and force the rest of us who live and work in the Catskills to pay the difference, is a serious problem. Today, my tax rate in the town of Middletown is 5 times what I pay in Brooklyn. That's right, 5 times, and growing as you guys buy up properties. This is simply not fair. New York City cannot survive without the 400 billion gallons of water you extract from the Catskills each year. You collect nearly $4 billion from metro area ratepayers, residents, and businesses. After expenses, it appears you have about $1 billion left over each year, permitting you to spend nearly $1.1 billion on garden projects in New York City ratepayers, including the Blue Belt system for Staten Island at $296 million, and your generosity, as you just explained a few minutes ago, to New York City ratepayers is even greater. As you're planning to forgive $1.1 billion in rental payments from New York City ratepayers. There's nothing in anything you've said, any of the documents that I have seen so far in which you've given any thought to the folks who live and work in the Catskills. They're not getting much out of this deal. Catskill residents and businesses need jobs, tax assistance, retraining, etc. And the DEP should accomplish this. If the DEP Water Board can cough up more than $2 billion, and you've just gotten a list of them, in benefits for New York City ratepayers, they can afford to provide $100 million a year in assistance to Catskill residents and businesses. While you appear to have sufficient funds to cover this assistance, if not, it would amount to just doubling your proposed rate hike to less than 5%, still about the lowest rate hike you have requested in a dozen years. This is the least you can do to begin to make up for the inequities that you have imposed on the Catskills for more than a century. But history suggests that you are more likely to wait for the residents and businesses of the watershed to give up, to leave without jobs, unable to pay inflated taxes, or until another flood occurs, giving New York City the opportunity to buy properties at 10 cents on the dollar. The bottom line is that New York City is exploiting the Catskills and giving nothing back. It is time for a change.
Mr. Ketchum, if I may address your comments.
Sure.
You can welcome to sit down or stand. Thank you so much for attending this hearing in Manhattan today. We actually were upstate on Wednesday in Valhalla. And if you had been at that presentation, one of the slides that we have in that presentation is that according to the memorandum of agreement that was signed, I believe, in 1905, when we buy land upstate, we actually continue to pay taxes. It does not come off the tax rolls. And in the coming year, in our budget, there's $163 million that goes to pay upstate property taxes. We do not pay taxes in city, you're correct, but upstate we do pay $163 million a year in property taxes. That is a lot.
Well, that's not enough. I understand what happens. You buy up properties, you don't take them off the tax rolls, but you reduce the property value, and in effect, you increase my property taxes. And it is really unfair for me and people upstate. And I'm well off, but I got a big house in the Catskills. But there are a lot of people out there that are really poor. They can't afford to pay the taxes they pay now. And to have tax rates 5 times greater up there than what I'm paying in Brooklyn is preposterous. So $163 million, maybe you need to double or triple that. And you can afford it. Raising $100 million through the water rate, that's 2.5%. Or as you showed in your figures there, is 0.05 cents per gallon to rate users. It's the people. I see my time's up. The people in The people in the Catskills are really good at spring.
Thank you, Mr. Hitcham.
Thank you.
Next, Jack Freund from the Rent Stabilization Association. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Jack Freund. I'm Executive Vice President of the Rent Stabilization Association. We have 25,000 members who own the majority of the nearly 1 million rent-regulated units in New York City. And on behalf of our members, we appreciate the fact that there's only a 2.1% proposed increase in water and sewer rates, the lowest in quite a number of years. And we're particularly pleased about the proposal that would extend the multifamily conservation deadline and to mitigate some of the potential liabilities. I think we could do a little bit more with that program with the money that I'm going to suggest you have available. However, even a low increase in water and sewer rates is nevertheless an increase and stands in stark contrast to the zero increase in rents that owners are living with as a result of actions by this administration's Rent Guidelines Board. Rental property owners are again looking at a strong possibility of another freeze in rental income, while this administration imposes higher property taxes and higher water and sewer rates. It therefore adds insult to injury when the mayor now proposes the elimination of the water board's rental payment to the city and then suggests that those funds be used only to provide a $183 credit to only homeowners in Class 1, leaving rental property owners to pay the full 2.1% increase. Mayor's suggestion is particularly egregious since multifamily owners are already paying effective real estate tax rates 5 times higher than homeowners. For the 600,000 plus owners of 1 to 3 family homes, this is a windfall, while rental property owners get left holding the bag. We must note that the mayor's proposal is not income qualified or limited in any way. Every homeowner will get this credit regardless of their income, regardless of the value of their property, and regardless of their economic need. Former Mayor Michael Bloomberg will get a $183 credit for his East Side townhouse, and Mayor Bill de Blasio will get 2 credits, one for each of his rental properties in Brooklyn, which are being rented at market rates. But multifamily rental owners, most of whom are renting regulated apartments at below market rates, are not going to get any credits. Mayors across the board, credit proposal is clearly distinguishable from the other programs the Water Board has authorized, such as the $116 annual rebate to homeowners who qualify for heating assistance or because of limited incomes, or who qualify for tax exemptions because they are elderly or disabled. Very simply, there is no justifiable basis for singling out one particular class of ratepayers to benefit from a rebate which is going to be subsidized by all other tax ratepayers. Mayor's proposal is not fair, it's not equitable, and it cannot be justified by any public policy consideration. It's clearly a political act. Rather, we're going to suggest that if the mayor is going to forego the rental payment in its entirety, and we welcome that, this is an issue we gave to Mayor de Blasio when he was public advocate, so we're pleased to see him finally deliver on this promise. But if he's going to eliminate the rent payment, then the additional $122 million savings would more than offset the required now $73 million revenue increase in the upcoming fiscal year, and would be better used to entirely eliminate the proposed 2.1% rate increase for all ratepayers, rather than to provide a one-time credit to a class of homeowners who already enjoy a privileged position with regard to municipal levies. The New York City Water Board has fiduciary responsibility not only to its bondholders, but also to its ratepayers. Water and sewer ratepayers have no recourse other than the New York City Water Board to ensure that the rate increases are kept to the minimal level necessary to maintain and finance the water and sewer system, and to ensure that these rates are equitably distributed among all ratepayers. The RSA strongly urges the New York City Board to accept the mayor's offer to eliminate the rental payment in its entirety, but to apply those funds to the complete elimination of the proposed 2-point rate increase this year. Now, we understand this is a one-shot deal, so I just want to point out to you that going forward, since the mayor has already said, and from this day forward, I'm quoting the mayor, your water bill will pay for one thing only, water, and that's the way it should be. If that's the case, the water board should also refuse requests from the city for transfer payments to other city agencies, such as the sanitation department, and should refuse to fund public amenities that are part of its future capital projects that should truly be the responsibility of all taxpayers, rather than the water and sewer ratepayers alone. These are items like that beautiful community facility on top of the Flushing CSO. So a picture of it, the ratepayers are paying for, but it's a Parks Department facility available to all the public. So I just in closing, I was pleased to hear the chairman open up this session with the comment that you're only looking at proposals. I know you're appointed by the mayor, you're responsible to the mayor, but you're also responsible to the ratepayers. You have an historic opportunity here to do what's never been done before, a rate freeze. We understand going forward that red line is going to continue and we're going to have to pay higher rate increases in the future. But this year, with the mayor coming through on his promise to eliminate the rent payment, you have this one-time opportunity to have a rate freeze for all rate payers, and we suggest to you that that is the fair and equitable treatment of this one-time opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker from Ashokan Water Services is Dov Vinar.
Good afternoon, Chairman, members, commissioners. Thank you very much for this opportunity. My name is Dov Vinar. I work for Ashokan Services, which is a consulting and engineering company that provides engineered water conservation solutions to New York real estate owners. We service about 8,500 New York City buildings, belonging to some 1,900 of your water board customers. As water management and conservation experts, our staff serves at the forefront of conservation legislation, advising New York City Urban Green Council, New York City Sustainability Advisory Board, New York City Code Adoption Committee, and the New York City Mayor's Green Codes Task Force. Members of BOMA, Hotel Association of New York City, IREM, Urban Green, U.S. Green Building Council, and Association of Realty Managers. We've read your proposal. We're very excited and glad to see many steps being taken to add conservation measures and means to encourage conservation of water and prevent sewer waste in the city of New York. And the one thing I'd like to touch upon, the one area of concern, was a single insertion into Part 4 billing programs in Section 6 concerning comprehensive water reuse, except that it also touches on sewer allowances in general. And we think this might have been inadvertent by the water board, because what we see here is an addition that we think will discourage a certain amount of conservation, and that is the line added in that says, residential and mixed-use properties that do not qualify as a CWRS, that's a comprehensive water reuse system property, are not entitled to exceptions to the standard wastewater allowances unless otherwise explicitly stated in this rate schedule. Now, up until now, the general rule is you pay a 159% charge for sewer use on the water that you use. And if you don't use the sewer, if you've got water that you're not putting back into the sewer system and sending for treatment, you can apply for a wastewater allowance. Not only the standards, but if you have if you want an exception, because you can show, and the rules require you to bring in an engineer's report, but if you can do it and you can prove that none or a very substantial amount of that water goes back into the system and gets treated, you can get an allowance for this, which is fair. You pay for what you use, you don't pay for what you don't use. And furthermore, that encourages you to find ways of not sending that water back to the water treatment plants, which is what the DEP wants. This provision takes away that encouragement. It discourages trying. It will discourage it, because unless you're part of the the CWRS system, you're not going to be allowed to apply for a special exemption. So it won't pay for you to try this. I don't think that's the intention of the water board. I think that's the effect it's going to have. We urge you not to put that language in and to leave it as it was, the way whether a customer uses a CWRS or not, anybody who's not sending water back to the treatment plant should have the right to apply for an allowance from having to pay the sewer charges for that. That'll encourage people to find ways of using the water with or without CWRS, and it's only fair. And that is our request. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker, also from Ashokan Services, Adil Ahmadiz.
Hi, good afternoon. I just have a quick point to make regarding Part 3, Section 4 of the Wastewater Allowance. Regarding the stormwater on parking lot not supplied with water supply system. So beginning in the 2011 fiscal year, the DEP began issuing stormwater charges as a pilot program, with parking lots arbitrarily chosen as the test subject. The program was to analyze how much such a fee should cost, to encourage stormwater capture and ultimately avoid sewer overflow. At the time, the DEP promised to issue a report of its findings, after which the fee would either be discontinued or made a permanent rule, subject to whatever was determined by the findings. To date, no such report has been made available, despite continued assurances over the last few years that you guys would release one. Therefore, we're requesting, if you're not going to release the report, please revoke the fee. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ronald Fields.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ronald Fields. I'm a retired teacher, a property owner in New York City, and the chair of the Council on Witness and Society of the World of the Presbytery of New York. I'm here as an individual to speak on a matter that might not seem very serious compared to some others, but indeed it has some very deadly ramifications, namely fluoride. This comes up every once in a while, and you know, as people have said, have foil caps on to keep away radiation. I'm not coming from that field. I'm speaking about serious science. Europe, 95% of Europe does not put fluoride in its water. Russia does not. China does not. I've come back from several trips in Africa where people have far superior teeth to ours, and they don't have fluoride in their water. They just don't consume sugar, which is sort of an obvious. Now, on the science, both the National Science Foundation and other groups have had studies. And there is a lot of science that is just very complex and confusing about fluoride. We do know that fluoride is an endocrine disruptor. We do know that there are connections to the diabetes epidemic we have, the kidney failures. There's a lot of human tragedy. There are links being studied now on Alzheimer and dementia, all having to do with fluoride in water. Now, when I was a child, I do remember fluoride treatments, and some fluoride was applied, and the doctor was very strong in his comments to spit it right out and wash him up and spit it out again. Yet someone has come out with the idea that putting fluoride in the general drinking water would somehow be beneficial. There is no science behind this. And there is a website called Fluoride Action Network that has thousands of scientific quotes here to document exactly what it is that I'm saying. Now again, maybe the amount of fluoride that we're putting in the water compared to these huge budgets is a blip in the system. But when it comes to each one of you, if some of your family members are affected by the effects of fluoride, it is not a small matter. Secondarily, I'm serving notice today at this meeting that there is a science out there, and someday, when it's become even clearer, there will be litigation. And again, we will all be paying for this litigation. Maybe it's going to be 0.010 of a penny per gallon, again, a small blip, but we are going to pay for it one way or the other. We're paying it in our personal health, and we're going to be paying for it later on when there's going to be litigation, because it is coming, it is clearer and clearer, and there is really no reason for this. As far as it's considered a medicine. The FDA does not approve this to be sold over the counter. Some companies have applied to have it sold as a prescription. The FDA will not approve this as a prescription either. Yet for some reason, the municipal systems are pouring this fluoroacetic acid into our drinking water, and there is no science behind it. So I am just leaving 2 examples here. You can get this off of the internet. I will also send this through the email system. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
If I might respond briefly, Mr. Fields?
Yes, Don, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. The city is required to add fluoride by the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. It's part of the New York City Health Code. We monitor the fluoride concentration levels continuously. The state maximum contaminant level is 2.2 parts per million. In New York City, we actually add 0.7 parts per million, and that is reduced from what we were adding about 2 years ago.
Thank you. So it should really be taken to the health department.
Yes. Thank you for your comment.
Thank you. At this point, I'd like to open up the meeting to anybody else who has not signed up to make a public comment but would like to. Please, sir, if you wouldn't mind just identifying yourself for the record.
Good morning. Thank you. My name is Herschel Weiss, also with the Shokin Water. I have the dubious honor of attending these meetings for most time. My first meeting, Commissioner Appleton got up and announced the end of frontage. He said frontage would be over, no more fixed-rate building in New York, and the room approved it. And the next year, they said we need an extension, for about 20 years. At the end, we did a bait and switch, and we changed frontage to MCP, multifamily conservation. And we said, you know what, that's okay, because the multifamily conservation comes with requirements that you can serve. And those requirements have been rolled back. 6 months ago in January, letters went out stating to every customer that you had to comply with the guidelines within 1 month. We contacted every one of our 8,000 customers that didn't comply and said you have to. And they said the DEP is going to push it off again. And then in February he sent another letter. And we called them back and said, they seem serious. Well, February passed, March he sent out another letter. Customers called up and they said, I think they're getting serious. I said, well, we better split your mains, do all these things. And DEP sent out another letter. And now you're extending the deadline 6 months, which is fine. But we're going to be back here in this room if the last 25 years are any indication, and you're going to be extending that deadline. So I'm not asking you to do anything. I think that 6 months is a great idea. But remember, you're all going to be here when we're sitting in January and we're saying we're extending it to next year, July, and next year, July, somehow we're going to be extending the deadline again. So please, remember, you extended it, it's an extension, don't go any further. I appreciate it, there's a lot of great things in this great schedule, it took a lot of work, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anybody else that would like to make comment? Seeing none, before we conclude this afternoon's hearing, I would again like to remind everyone that written remarks can also be submitted to the New York City Water Board by mail. The address is up on the wall, 5917 Junction Boulevard, the 8th floor in Flushing, New York, 11373. You can also submit by email at New York City Water Board, NYC Water Board at dep.nyc.gov. Please, again, submit any written remarks no later than 5 p.m. on May 12th. Mr. Chairman, as we have no further business, this hearing is adjourned.
Thank you very much, everyone. And thank all of you for coming.